It's Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Higher Ed Live. Higher Ed Live is part of the Higher Ed Live Network, a series of professional development web shows and podcasts which are always free and accessible to you in the archives at higheredlive.com and on iTunes. Be a part of the broadcast by tuning in live and sharing your insights and questions using the Higher Ed Live hashtag on Twitter. You can receive weekly updates with live show dates and times by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. Today's show would not be possible without the support of Cornell University and M. Stoner. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. In June, M. Stoner is hosting an in-depth two-part webinar series focused on brand strategy. We just tweeted out a link with that right now where you can learn more and register. Ooh. Let me stop that little echo of myself there and get back to thanking our lovely sponsors. Omni Update is the leading web content management system, CMS provider for higher education. The company's web CMS OU Campus is secure and scalable with great tools and features, deployment flexibility, and an awesome user community. FormStack is a robust online form building solution with an intuitive drag and drop interface. The platform makes it easy for marketers to create branded mobile web forms without writing any code at all. Using FormStack, higher ed marketers have the power to integrate existing applications, ensure software compliance, and double online response rates. I'm your host, Ashley Budd, and today on the show we're talking about work hacks. The simple things you do in your everyday work life to make it just that much better. Today's show is broken down into 3 parts: apps, resources, and favorite tips and tricks sourced from you, our listeners. Start sharing your favorite work hacks with us on Twitter using the Higher Ed Live hashtag now. Joining me today is George Williams, blogger and editor of the Chronicle of Higher Education's Prof Hacker blog, and associate professor of English at the University of South Carolina Upstate. We'll be hearing from George in just a few minutes. We started talking about work hacks on Higher Ed Live in January, so I'm here to follow up with a few of my favorite hacks and how I've put them into practice. The number 1 hack we identified was implementing time tracking for you and your team. And time tracking is not anything I've ever had to do as part of my job before, and it's still not a job requirement of mine, but it is, as we identified earlier, in these shows, one of the first things that you can do to better establish your return on investment for the projects that you're working on. So in 2014, this was our top pick of simple things to implement for yourself or for your team. And it's to know how much time you're spending on these projects. If you want to be more efficient, you need to know where your time is going. There are a number of time tracking apps available. Some are more manual. There are apps that can pop up with time tracking and you can write in what you're doing and it will log it for you. So something as simple as that. And then there are some more highly automated time tracking apps. I've been testing one of the more highly automated apps. It's called Rescue Time, and I've been doing it for the last 3 weeks, and I'm already willing to recommend it to anyone who is an iOS user. I haven't tried using it on any Windows or Android applications yet, but I have it fully integrated into my Mac laptop that I use for my work projects, and it's a great little piece of software that you can download and either use in a web browser to track on a dashboard, or you can download it on your iPhone or Android device. And what it does is it kind of runs in the background on your computer and keeps track of all of the different applications that you have running and for how long and at what time. I want to share just like a little demo actually of some of the reports that you get from Rescue Time because I think it's valuable to see the end result. So pulling those up right now. Rescue Time will send you a short email report at the end of each week, and it will show you what you've been up to. I'm just going to switch over to a quick screen share for you. The first thing I'm showing is a report that came to my email inbox, and it shows that I've been working with this application for 3 weeks. I've logged over 33 hours just this past week on my desktop or on my laptop computer. And for those of you that aren't familiar with my my current role at Cornell University, I am working remotely now as a social media strategist for Cornell Alumni Affairs and Development. So I was really curious to see what kinds of things I was actually doing and how much time I was spending on the computer. So you can see I'm logging an awful lot of time of work time on my computer. And what Rescue Time will do is it'll break down your different applications that you're using. You can select different categories for things. You can mark things as highly productive or highly distracting, and then kind of in the middle of that spectrum. So you'll see that I have a productivity score here of 82%, and that I was spending most of my time on things that I found to be highly productive or very productive. So a nice little summary comes to you each week. You can of course, go into their dashboard on the web browser and see even more of that. You can view the web browser or the dashboard actually at any time in real time. And I'm using the free version of Rescue Time. There are more fun things that you can unlock, but this is all part of the free app. One other piece that I just want to show quickly was kind of one of these nice added bonuses that Rescue Time does for us. And I think I need to a little bit bigger. If you could, if you caught it in the email, they asked, had a nice little call out asking if I was overloaded by communication, because I was spending a lot of my time doing communication type work, and as an over communicator myself, I know that I know this to be true. So this is a nice breakdown of the past 2 weeks that I've been using Rescue Time, showing that 12% of my time has been devoted to email and communication in some way that I've categorized it, a whopping 8.5 hours. There's also this nice little tool that they give you about email velocity, knowing that I am a heavy email user, and I think that's part of being a remote employee. I can actually track how much time I'm spending on each email. So I used this calculator when I got the email from Rescue Time last week. I noted that I had sent over 200 emails in the last 14 days, and so I was spending about 2 minutes per email. It's a great handy tool that has a lot of these kind of hidden Easter eggs that come along with it, so I'm happy to recommend that tool to others, and happy to follow up on our time tracking conversation that we started back in January. I have a couple other apps that I'm interested in sharing with you all and hearing more about what you're using. I've been sourcing work hacks from listeners today, and I'm going to be sharing them live on the air later in the show. And it's not too late to share your favorite work hacks with us on Twitter, so just tweet using the Higher Ed Live hashtag, and I will collect those from you and share them on air. The other two apps that I want to quickly share with you before we bring George onto the show, one is a project management tool, and it's an application called Slack. I want to thank Leah Davis from Boston University for sharing this application with me last week at the Higher Ed think tank we hosted here in Saratoga. This is similar to other project management applications that you might be familiar with. Many places use Basecamp. I've used an app that's similar to this called Trello. So you might be familiar with similar kinds of products. Leah noted that Slack had a really high adoption rate on her team at Boston University. So I started testing it actually just last week, and we'll be tweeting out a link with the Slack application. But what I really like about Slack is that it's extremely user-friendly. The interface itself is very user-friendly, but it also has a really nice onboarding process built into it. So as you're first learning to use the application, things inside the application are highlighted and explained to you, so you have a chance to learn all of the ins and outs without having to go through a big tutorial or sit in on a demo. It teaches you how to use the application as you are exploring it. So great onboarding process. The native apps for desktop and mobile are what I found far superior to the browser-based application that Slack offers. So if you are going to test out Slack and you're hoping for those really high adoption rates from your team, I would encourage you to go all in on these downloads and download the native application from the iOS or Android store on your computer or on your mobile device. And Slack will pick up and leave off where you have left off no matter what device you're on. So great little tool so far from what I can see, and I wanted to share that with you. The second app isn't new, but it's continuing to evolve, and I have yet to discuss it on Higher Ed Live. And as the Internet of Things expands, I want you to be aware of IFTTT, if this then that, which is a simple statement that can be made using this interactive automation tool, and it will connect many different platforms with new channels being added all the time. So it's kind of one of those things that you have to see to understand, and we'll tweet out a link to that application as well. And if you're following the Higher Ed Live Twitter handle, you'll see all of these links from us. IFTTT, if this then that, works more elegantly with some platforms than others, and so you'll see that you can link a lot of your social media channels with this app. Sometimes the posts that are automated through the service come out really nice, and other times it's a little clunky. So it's not a be-all, end-all solution to everything, linking all the apps that you have, but there are some really great recipes, as they call them, available, and you can browse through other people's recipes on this application. So we're sharing those, a few of those over Twitter. The CASE social media group has created a spreadsheet of their favorite IFTTT recipes. If you have favorite if this then that recipes, you can tweet them to us using the Higher Ed Live hashtag, and we'll also go ahead and share those on air. So I moved through things pretty quickly, and I'm happy to do that because we have George Williams here with us today, and George has a hard stop for another meeting at 2 o'clock, so I want to welcome him to the show and get him unmuted so he can join our broadcast here. Looks like, George, you might have to unmute yourself. There we go.
Yeah.
Great. Hi, George. Welcome. I'm so happy that you can join me.
Thanks for inviting me, and I'm happy. I have to admit that Higher Ed Live wasn't on my radar already, and I'm glad to have learned about it.
Well, we're glad that we are on your radar now. I'm curious about you've been with Prof Hacker at the Chronicle for, is it 4 years now? Is that what I spied on your LinkedIn profile?
I think that we started off as our own site, profhacker.com, and then we joined the Chronicle about 4 years ago. That's right. We were our own operation for close to a year.
Great. So I'm really curious both about that evolution and your background in teaching and the use of collaboration tools that I'm sure informs a lot of what you're writing about on the blog.
Okay. Well, the first thing that I would say needs to be said about ProfHacker is that it's a team of people, that it's not just me. And I mean, I know people know that, but I like to foreground that as being really important. I learn from everything that people write on the site. There's a saying that, you know, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. And I'm definitely not the smartest person on ProfHacker, but it was born in 2000. The idea was born in 2009 at an unconference at the Center for History and New Media at George Mason. And I've been friends with Jason Jones online for a decade or so. We both started blogging in 2003, and in 2009 I finally met him face to face. And the vibe at this event, which was one of the VAT camps, was so helpful and so collaborative and open and pretentious, it was unmarred by like ego, and here's this great idea that I have, and all of you must use it. It was more along the lines of, here's something that I've found works for me, let me show you how it works, maybe you'll find it useful too, and I'm also interested in hearing what you have to say. And I thought, you know, we need a blog like this for higher education. There are so many blogs about sort of efficiency or you know, applying the concept of a hack to different aspects of how you live your life or do your job, and there wasn't anything at the time in 2009 for higher education. And Jason thought it was a great idea, and then I got cold feet, and then Jason said, no, we should do this. So it wouldn't have happened if it was just me. And a lot of it's evolved into its own thing that wasn't exactly, is probably better than what I was imagining, and that is thanks to all of the people who have contributed. If it was just me, it would not be as successful as it is. So all the writers who have joined us, and even the people who have given us guest posts, have been very instrumental in making it what it is. And you know, I've learned, and I think people have learned a lot from it. It's clearly struck a nerve, or it's filled a need with people, and I'm very happy to see that.
Well, I think it's a fantastic resource, and I'm so happy to have you here today, having this breadth of experience in trying to tackle work hacks. Can you help us kind of frame that part of the conversation, how you define a hack?
Sure. I think a lot of times, like initially, people when they saw the when they saw the Twitter handle ProfHacker, or they saw that we were referring to our site, our project as ProfHacker, you know, words obviously have all these different layers of meaning, and a lot of people thought, oh, hacker, you think that you're just this expert at using computers, that you're like, that's not really what hacker means. A hack is just an inelegant solution to a problem, or a solution that's good enough, that you encounter something and you figure out a workaround, and it works well enough for you. It does, you know, it could involve, if it's a physical thing, it could involve duct tape, you know, or really ugly staples or something. But if it works, that's fine. And if you look at the etymology of the word, you know, you can go back to the 18th century of them using the insult of hack to talk about amateurs, you know, the hacks as writers, or their references to hack preachers and things like that. And it's not claiming that we're geniuses or that we know the way everybody needs to do something. A hack is just, here's a solution that you found, might not be the best one, but it works for you, so run with it. And I also think, you know, the other thing in terms of framing this conversation is the whole point. Another objection that sometimes comes up is people, and they're not wrong, feel like institutions, both of higher learning and of, you know, even profitable, you know, corporations, that they want to get more and more and more out of the people who work there. And that's exhausting. You know, eventually you're gonna burn out. And so the point of what we try to do with talking about productivity is not, here's how you can keep doing more and more and more work. You know, here's how you can fill up your life with nothing but work. It's not about that at all. You've got a certain amount of work that's your responsibility. If you can get that work done sooner, that means other time in your life can be devoted to the things that we would all like to be doing, like taking care of our families, or taking care of ourselves, or pursuing things that aren't necessarily related to how we choose to make money. So I don't want anyone to feel like, you know, what we're trying to advocate is employees aren't doing enough, and here's how they can do more. It's more about protecting the resource of time for you, so you can get, you know, enough sleep that you need to get, and so that you can have a life outside of work, to try to find the balance that you want to find in your own life.
I really like that statement, protecting our own time, and I think it's been a really great experiment for me to use this application to identify what I think is productive time. No one's telling me that my use of TweetDeck is distracting. I'm saying this is a neutral zone for me to live in during my day, and that email, you know, when I'm on my Outlook email, that is productive, but when I'm over in my personal email, that's a little bit more distracting. And being able to kind of identify for myself what is valuable time spent, and that's just on my desktop, not you know, not counting the offline hours, which are very valuable to me, of course. So I appreciate that sense of using the idea of productivity, not just to have productive work time, but to have a productive life. So I hope we can continue to keep that balance as we talk about some of our favorite hacks today.
I really like your discussion of that source that tracks how you're using your time. I think that that's how we think we're using our time and how we actually are using our time can be two very different things. Obviously, I like playing around with different fitness apps. Not that I'm the most fit person in the world, but you know, to track how much. Like I have one of these Fitbit Flex, and I know as a result of this when I have walked the number of, and this is something that I've decided for myself. That's really important. Is that it's not somebody else tracking and giving me, you know, hey, you have to do this and you're not doing that. But it makes me more conscious of, oh, I'm not really being as active as I like to think that I am. And so to apply that within reason to one's own work environment, I think would be good, because it would help you identify those places where, oh, I'm spending a lot of time on this, and when I think about it, this isn't that important. Why am I spending so much time on this? Like something like that.
Exactly. We've discussed on the show before how it's typically 20% of the work that we do that brings in the most return, and it's really hard to identify what you're doing, how much time you're spending on things if you're really not tracking them so closely. And I am coming from higher education and being a salaried employee myself, the thought of time tracking and even telling my supervisors that this is something that I'm doing is, it at first was a scary thing for me to jump into, but now I see so much more clearly how our business decisions can be made, and everyone can be a lot happier if you are able to articulate what you're spending time on for a certain project. One of the funniest things that I saw using this application was that I spent 15 minutes a week just logging into my laptop, just typing in my password to log in. And that was pretty surprising, and maybe a reason to move forward with those thumbprint logins to make it just that much quicker and get those 15 minutes of my life back. But yeah, some really nice kind of personal discoveries come along with time tracking, whether it's work or the fitness piece of your life. We have this data available to us now, so it's really fun to look at.
I would loop back around to the point that I was saying earlier about seeking balances. Okay, so if you could take those 15 minutes that you spend logging in and reduce it to 5 or 3, that doesn't mean that that's like 15 or 12 minutes that you can now do more work. That's like 12 minutes you could go for a run. You know, that's 12 minutes you could make a somewhat more elaborate dinner for yourself. Like, that's an example of what I'm talking about. Most of us don't have to, well, and there are plenty of people who work in higher ed, like, you know, the staff who are in the Army. They say, you know, like an army moves on its stomach, by which they mean there are all these basic things you need, like to feed people. The university runs on, you know, the staff who work here. They have to clock in, obviously. There are a certain number of hours that they're responsible to be here. And for faculty, you know, I think a lot of times it feels like our our work expands to fill whatever available space we're not doing something else, and that can be exhausting. And so to be able to reduce that, not to say, oh, I'm going to work 10 hours a week, but maybe you're working 55 instead of 70, or whatever it is that you want to do. That's an example. Like that 15 minutes is something that you might not have even noticed. So
exactly. So before we jump into some of your own favorite hacks, can you, as we're thinking about how we might make our time more effective and efficient, do you have any just general getting started advice to share?
I would say figure out what it is. Like, it could just be your sense of stuff that you don't want to be spending as much time on, or it could be that you use a tool like what you just demoed. Mm-hmm. Figure out what you're spending most of your time on. Figure out the things in your schedule that are taking up a lot of your time. And figure out if the reason they're taking up a lot of your time is because how you're using them, or how you're going about doing that, or how your collaborators or colleagues, if it's as a result of inefficiencies. I mean, it might be that you're spending a lot of time doing something and you're like, good, I should be spending a lot of time doing that. I feel fine. But I suspect that most people are going to find, yeah, I wish I spent less time on this, or I wish I wish we spent less time on that. And so I have some, strategies for dealing with those particular things. In my experience, the stuff that I wish I devoted less time to would be email. How much time I spend just in my inbox. It's greater than it should be. This is not necessarily in order, but like, I think everybody hates when you're trying to schedule a meeting, when you've got maybe an ad hoc committee of 6 or 7 or 10 people, and there's the endless, barrage of emails. Well, can you meet here? Well, I can't meet there. Well, I can't do this. Well, I can do that. Like, that's annoying, and it takes up too much time. Service is an important part of what we do. I'm not one of those faculty members who looks upon service as this like drudge work. It's us basically helping determine how the university runs. And so, but the meetings that we have, not always our best use of time. So sometimes meetings are unproductive, sometimes they're unfocused. That's something that can be addressed. And then for me, one of the things that I feel like I'm always afraid I'm taking too much time is responding to student work, grading and responding to student writing. So those are the things that, for me, in my work life, that I try to make those, not that I want to make them less important, but I want to be able to get them done using less time so that I can spend more time doing things like prepping for class, or getting some research work done, or other things that I want to be doing for the university.
Well, I absolutely want to help tweet out some of your favorite pieces of software and some of the articles that you have on ProfHacker, but I already showed you that I spend nearly a day of my week on email. So I want to talk about some of your hacks for making that more efficient use of my time. And I think the little calculator that I did to see how much time I was spending per email was eye-opening. I thought it would be that my rate of time per email would be much higher. So I'm still trying to figure out my balance there. But where should we start? Should we start with that? Were there other things that you wanted to share before we jumped into email?
I think the one caveat that I would give is, a lot of times advice about working in higher ed assumes that every institution is the same, and they're not. They're really, really not. I teach at a 4-year comprehensive regional university. I teach, our tenure track faculty teach 4 classes per semester. The research expectations are still there, but they're not as high as if you were at a research-oriented university. And so the advice that I give, or the things that I speak about from my experience, are not going to be the same. They're not going to be they're not going to be applicable necessarily to somebody who's at a more research-oriented institution, or somebody who's at a liberal arts institution. So everybody has to figure out for themselves, and what what advice to follow and what not to follow. And one of the best ways to do that, in my opinion, is your institution will hopefully have a faculty manual. There will hopefully be promotion and tenure guidelines that are both institutional and that are local to your department. Use those as your map for how you're going to go about doing the work that you do.
Excellent. So true. I've been at 2 institutions in my higher ed tenure, and they were, as on the surface, they looked very similar to me, but internally, 2 totally different places. So there can be a truer statement in higher education than that. Let's then talk about some of your email tips and advice for us in that area.
I'm recycling advice that I've gotten, from other people. So I don't mean to claim that all of these things, or even that any of these things, originate with me. 2 things that you can do, or maybe even 3 things that you can do that aren't really technology solutions. Not every work hack is going to be related to technology. It's more about making decisions about how you are going to use email and just changing the way you use email. So one thing I would do, and I'm terrible with email, so don't assume that I'm putting myself up as some sort of example of efficiency perfection. Restrict your time with it. You don't have to live inside your inbox. There are other ways of communicating. So maybe what you decide to do is spend an hour, no more than an hour in the morning, and no more than an hour in the afternoon. And that does end up working out to, if you've got a 5-day week, if you're spending an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, that's 10 hours. That's even more than a whole work day. But if you do that time and then you close it and you're doing other work, I think there's less. I find it when I can manage to do something like that, it's less distracting. If you have the freedom to not check your work email from home, don't check your work email from home. Don't carry that around in the back of your head like, oh yeah, there's this thing I got to worry about. So that's one thing, is restrict your time with it, which I find hard to do. The second thing, which I also find hard to do, is if you're going to check your email, be prepared to act on it. Don't look at your email and then go, oh yeah, I got to remember to do that. Oh yeah, I got to remember to do that. Oh yeah, I got to remember to do that, because that's just torturing yourself. So when you log into your email, be prepared to do one of 3 things with each and every message in your inbox. Some messages, you're going to look at them and then you're just going to delete them because maybe they don't apply to you. Maybe you're in a small enough campus community where you get an email that's sent to all faculty or even everybody on campus. There's a blue Nissan in the parking lot and the lights are on. You can delete that, obviously. So you're going to do one of 3 things. You're going to delete it. You're going to respond to it right then and there. Like the first time you see that email, you're going to respond to it right then and there. If it takes you less than 2 minutes, because then you're done until maybe the next response. And then the third thing that you can do is save it for later. This is going to take me more than 2 minutes, and so I'm going to put it into a specific folder that says respond to this later. And then once you go through everything in your inbox, ideally, and this is an ideal, it's a utopian ideal, you're done. And sometimes your responses that are less than 2 minutes might be, hey, thank you for asking me this question. I need to think about this before I'm not sure that I want to commit to being involved in this, but I'll respond to you by blah, blah, blah. And that gives you some time. But don't just don't look at your email because you're bored. Because that's not efficient, and I don't think it's good for your psychological health. It's certainly not good for mine. So that's 2 non-technology related things you can do. And the third one is a don't. Those are 2 do's. Here's a don't. Don't use email for everything. Number 1, for communication, face-to-face communication or real-time communication, it could be digitally mediated, might be a better solution. Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's a Skype session. Maybe it's you walk down the hall and you talk to the person in face-to-face. It doesn't have to be an email. It really doesn't have to be. In terms of collaboration, if you and your collaborators are working on a document together, like let's say it's a grant that's going to fund a project, don't email each other drafts back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Instead, use some kind of online word processing environment like Google Docs or Office 365 or Zoho or something like that, because that's much, much better. You don't have this proliferation of different versions, and you don't have stuff coming into your inbox that you've got to manage somehow. I mean, I always feel like my inbox is like a bathtub where the faucet's constantly running, and I've got to, it's going to overflow. if I don't do something. So yeah, not great. Sometimes there are better ways of communicating, and there are definitely better ways of collaborating on things. Scheduling, trying to find a meeting time. Don't use email for that, because that's going to just proliferate a lot of messages. That instead use something like doodle.com or whenisgood.net or selectthedate.com, or even, we're a Microsoft campus, so we've got Microsoft Exchange Server. And I know there are probably ways that you can leverage that, and whatever your campus is, they probably have. You might be surprised. Talk to your IT department and see if they have some kind of tool that would allow for scheduling. So that's a sort of don't do these things. And really, the one technical or digital solution I would have is first of all, because it's useful for a variety of reasons, buy yourself some text expansion software. There are lots of different things out there for Mac and for Windows. And what it allows you to do is, we often find ourselves writing the same thing over and over and over again. What it allows you to do is create a shortcut, and you just type that little shortcut, and it expands into the longer message, and that saves you some time. So, for me, an example would be, I have two examples of this, that I have a template where a student writes me and says, I missed class yesterday, I'm sorry, this is what happened, and I just wanted to let you know. And it's a good idea just to acknowledge that. And so rather than typing up a message from scratch every time, I have a template where I say, dear, if the person's name were Ashley, dear Ashley. And then I do my little snippet, which is like a colon or a semicolon and then the word attendance. And it expands into, thank you for letting me know. Remember that the policy for absences it's just this part of my syllabus. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know. Dr. Williams, blah, blah, blah. And it takes me 2 seconds instead of 60 seconds or instead of 2 minutes. And those little things add up. The other one is when people want to schedule an appointment with me. Hey, I'd like to talk to you about X. When are you available? And I have a snippet that just points them to like my calendar online, which also has an interface for scheduling a meeting with me. So those are just two examples among many of, you're going to write the same things over and over again a lot. Use a text expansion software to make that easier.
Wow, that is new one to me. And I know that there was an article in ProfHacker about text expansion, so we just tweeted that out for those of you who, like me, just had a little brain explosion there. Thanks for that one.
It's totally from Jason Jones that I got it.
Awesome.
Yeah. The second technical solution would be figure out whatever email software you're using, figure out how to automate sorting your messages when they come in. Like you can create folders. If it's from a student, if it's possible to detect who a student is for whatever reason, put it into a student folder and then go to that folder on a regular basis. There are also, if there's somebody who's always sending something out that doesn't apply to you, and you want to just immediately delete that. And that sounds mean. I mean, it sounds, well, who are you deleting? So here on campus, we've got a credit union that I don't belong to. And so I'm never going to need to see those messages, but the announcements get sent to everybody on campus. I have my software automatically delete that, and that helps lessen somewhat the constant flow of water into the bathtub.
Sure. Yeah, and when you start calculating, the 15 minutes to log into something, I can't imagine what that number looks like for emails that just went straight to my trash can.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of my day. Even on my phone, swiping delete, delete, delete. It does take up time, so that's another really great point. Other things around kind of those things that we shouldn't do, ways to make them better.
So, I already talked about like trying to schedule a meeting, and there are tools online for that. Mm-hmm. So the other two things that I'm mindful of our time. So the other two things that I would address would be when you have a meeting, there are some simple things that you can do, and this is going to sound like it's obvious advice, but we so often, and I include myself, fail to follow this advice. One is have an agenda and share it with everyone ahead of time. Like, what are you going to talk about? Let people know, because the more time they can use thinking about a topic before they meet is the less time they have to think about that topic in the meeting. They can decide, or they can learn what they need to learn or ask whatever questions ahead of time. Not every communication needs to be during the meeting. So have an agenda, share it ahead of time. We often say, oh, we're going to meet at 1 o'clock, but we don't say when we're going to end, which, I think often we feel like, when is this going to be over? Well, if you tell people we're going to meet from 1 to 2:30, then okay, I'm here for this long, and you can track where you are in the agenda and figure out, are we on track or not? And devote the appropriate amount of time to the topics. And if you want to tell people, I understand that you want to make this comment about something, but you're taking, but maybe we could bracket this off to an online conversation because I'm mindful of our time and we need to move on. One of the things that I started doing just sort of by accident, because sometimes I was on the board of directors of a local nonprofit, and I had never done that kind of work before, and it wasn't work, it was volunteer. It wasn't paid work. I was at a meeting once, and I was really unclear as to why we were meeting, and I asked this question: okay, so by the end of this meeting, what is it that you want us to have accomplished? And the person who was the president of the organization said, oh, that's a really good way of putting that, and so it's sort of set on the table, here's how we know if we're done today. And if it's just, I need to get through all these announcements to you, then that's that. But if it's, we need to make a decision about X, then that also helps you with time management. Like if you've got 15 minutes left and somebody's still sort of wanting to talk about something that's not really related to, it's not going to help you get through that decision.
That never happens.
It always happens, and half the time that happens, I'm the one to blame for doing it. And so, another point would be check yourself. Like, are you the person in the room who's extending the meeting? If you are, then stop being, try to stop being that person. But also, don't beat yourself up too badly if you are that person. And then the final thing is, if you don't need to meet, don't meet. My department has a meeting for the whole department once a month. But sometimes our chair will say, he'll send out an email first that says, please share with me any items that you would like to see addressed at our meeting this month. And then if a couple of days go by and he doesn't have anything and nobody suggested anything, he will, in advance of the meeting, say, okay, well, there's no pressing business and nobody has sent me any suggestions, so we're not going to meet this month. And I make that suggestion cautiously because it's important to have the meetings that are required by your institution and to do the work of running the institution with full, and the departments, its various parts, with full participation. But sometimes you meet because you think you're supposed to meet, and those are the worst. Those meetings are the absolute worst. So,
yeah, I can't agree more. I'm going to make sure that you are going to make it to your meeting, and we don't eat up that precious time. But I know you have so many great resources about being a faculty member, working with students, rubrics, more on that text expansion, using digital audio to support your work with students. And so I'm going to be sharing those over the Higher Ed Live Twitter handle, and we'll be sure to include some of the links to those great articles on Prof Hacker right in the blog post in this archived show. So, George, I won't take up any more of your time, but I want to thank you so much for dropping in and chatting today, and hopefully we can keep this conversation rolling.
All right. Thanks very much, Ashley. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share some of those work hacks that you've been tweeting to us all day. The first one comes from Nathan Reimer. He says, put applications like Outlook, TweetDeck, Firefox, Spotify, your instant messengers, all of those things that you use to be productive every day in your startup folder on your computer. So when you start up your computer, they auto load. It's a great tip. He's at Nate Dog Reimer on Twitter. We've got another one from Liz Gross, who says, avoid overcommitting yourself by scheduling work-like meetings. She's got more about this topic on her blog, so you can check out lizgross.net. Effective meetings was a great piece of this topic today, so perhaps we will talk a little bit more about that in the future. got one from Jason Merriweather. He's JL Merriweather06 on Twitter. He starts his day with a prayer and turns on the Eric Clapton Pandora station. It's those little pieces of life that make you happy in starting your day that is a work hack tip from Jason. So thank you, Jason, for that. And we've got one more that I'll share, and we'll of course, continue to share and retweet your work hacks over the Higher Ed Live hashtag. Moonball says, at Moonball on Twitter, says that her web team has started using Asana to help with team collaboration and project management. So another tool to check out in addition to Slack if you're trying to use applications for project management with your teams. I want to thank, as always, our program sponsors, mStoner, Omni, Update, and ForHipStack for making today's show possible. We're going to be back with a whole slew of great shows and some big announcements from the Higher Ed Live Network coming up here in June, so please stay tuned for that. You can always get reminders about this show and others by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter right there on our homepage at higheredlive.com. You can also browse our archives and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. I'm Ashley Budd, and I'll be back next month with more Higher Ed Live.